Hello and welcome to the Road to National series. Within this series, I'm going to try and qualify and compete in the British National Powerlifting Championships within raw powerlifting. Now, each episode within this series is going to show you some aspect of my diet, my lifestyle, but mainly my training leading up to try and compete. And there's going to be some sort of educational topic to go alongside this. So I'm going to cover things like my programming and how I'd advise you program, the max effort method, the dynamic effort method, why I utilize those methodologies, how I would advise you program accessories, how intensely you should be training your accessories, how much volume I'd advise, as well as specific things like pieces of equipment for a home gym if you're thinking of building that, what you should do whether you're injured or sick, or if you're going on holiday, how to manage that. There's going to be a wide array of topics that I'm going to cover, and if you think of any topic that you want me to cover, comment it down below. But without further ado, let's get to it. So today I'm going to be taking you through a lower dynamic workout, and later in the video I'm going to be talking to you about technique and bracing. So first things first, these are my dynamic deadlifts for this week. This is week 2 of my dynamic wave. I normally do a 3-week wave, building up in weight and slightly reducing the reps over the week. So for this week, I'm doing 4 sets of 5 at 85% of my 1 rep max, sticking with the 100 kilos of band tension last week, which is 37% of my 1 rep max. I now have 130 kilos bar tension, which is 48% of my 1 rep max, to make the total 85% 1 rep max. The dynamics felt much better this week than last week, and I think that's because the bands, I spent a lot of time warming them up and stretching them to sort of set them back to normal. It has been very cold weather, and I think the bands have been seizing up, and it's meant that they're sort of uneven. One side's more frozen than the other. So last week's dynamics actually moved worse, even though I had less weight on the bar. So yeah, the dynamics felt good. I still sort of have that second pull just there, if you can see right at the top of my thighs. That is where my sticking point is, and band tension really exposes this weakness. It is a physical weakness, but it's also a technical limitation. I would like to make my deadlifts one fast, smooth motion. So that links to today's talking point of technique. I'll revisit that later, but first I'm on to my accessories. So the first accessory here is split squats. Now, as I mentioned in other videos, I have been dealing with a knee injury on my right knee, and it hurts in this position when it's at the back usually. The only way to get around it is to do that very wide style. At the front like this, the knee's completely fine, but the reason I've had to do this split squat technique with such a wide stance and leaning over the front foot is that when my right knee is in the back position, if I go any narrower, it would hurt. But usually I would suggest that you do split squats with a narrower stance standing upright, but obviously you have to accommodate your body and your injuries, which is what I'm doing here. I went pretty heavy with these and they felt good. I had no pain afterwards from my knee because I'd made that technical correction of widening my stance. So the other accessories I do in this workout after split squats, it's hamstring curls, then it's calf raises, and then it's reverse hypers. So whilst those accessories are playing on screen, I'm going to talk to you about technique and bracing. So the first thing I'm going to cover is lifting technique. Now, obviously, I can't give any specific corrections for any lifter on any lift because that would take me forever to go through every lift ever and everything that you should be doing. And sometimes the right technical corrections for some people are the exact opposite ones for others. So what technique actually is trying to optimize your leverages. It's trying to optimize the way the force of the weight you're lifting is being applied to your body. So it is a very personal thing. There are 3 things that determine how strong you are. The first one is your leverages. The other 2 are your cross-sectional area of your muscles, so basically how big your muscles are, and how much neurological drive you have is the third one, how much of your muscles you can take advantage of. They're the main ways that people try and get stronger, but by altering your technique, you can change your leverages. So, for example, for somebody who has really long femurs in a squat, they might find that if they took a narrow stance with their feet in parallel, and they'd have to send their hips miles back and lean their torso very far forward in order not to fall back because their femurs are so long. For other shorter femured people, they can keep their back really upright. But a technical change that the long femured person could do is to widen their stance and send their knees further forward over their toes. That's going to allow them to squat with a more upright back position. So that's an example of a technical change you could make. But as I said, that's more applicable to the long femured person. So technique is very personal. To take an example as well, in the bench press, Julius Maddox, the best bench presser of all time, takes a narrow grip. He has his pinky fingers on the ring of the barbell. In powerlifting, you're allowed your index fingers on the ring, but he chooses to go narrower, even though he's a massive man. There are people with smaller frames who are much smaller than him who bench wider grip. That might be optimal for them because they get a less range of motion in the bench, but for him and his strengths, his triceps might be very strong. That will allow him to do a closer style of bench and make that more optimal. So what you should do is just play around with lots of different techniques and see what works for you. Now, one thing that is applicable to almost every technique, and particularly to the powerlifting lifts, is bracing. So bracing is so important because your body is basically made up of two big sturdy structures on your torso, and they're just connected by your spine. Your big top sturdy structure is your rib cage. There's bones going all the way round with your organs inside, and at the bottom you have the pelvis, again with the bones going all the way round, but they're just connected by the spine. A thin flexible column that is actually pretty strong. People worry that the spine's weak and that you should never like round it or train it in any way. Your spine is strong. However, when you're doing very heavy lifts like a squat, like a deadlift, like a bench, one of the most common ways people fail squats and deadlifts is they round their back and cave forward. It's not the leg drive on a squat, it's that their back couldn't hold it. So bracing is very important, and what you're basically trying to do when bracing is take as much air in as possible into your lungs and push out as hard as you can. And what this is it's like putting a basketball in between your rib cage and your hips, and it's like pumping that basketball really hard full of air. It's pushing out, and the pressure means that now that middle section is solid. It almost joins the whole torso into one big solid block, which is going to allow you to lift more weight. So that's the idea of bracing. I very much recommend that if you are trying to powerlift or get stronger, learning to brace is very important, and developing your ab muscles is really great because that's like making the basketball, in my analogy, thicker. It's making your abdominal wall thicker so that when you brace and push outwards, it's a more solid brace. So I definitely work on bracing. There are other bracing tutorials out there, but that is the fundamentals of it. You're basically trying to push out as hard as you can, and it's that outward pressure that provides stability. That's what a belt is for. You shouldn't use a belt if you're using like a powerlifting or lifting belt just to strap around and hope it holds your body. The point of that belt is that you push and brace against it. So coming back to today's workout, now onto the final set of reverse hypers. These are so hard on my stomach. You can't really see it here, but that corner, if you've never done reverse hypers, it presses right in like to your bladder. It makes you feel sick while doing it, and that is sort of the limiting factor of reverse hypers for me. I think I need to increase the weight because I'm not really near fatigue, and as you can see there, it hurts my stomach. So that is it for today's video. I hope you did in fact enjoy the video. If you did, drop it a like, drop a comment, subscribe, click the bell, and that is it.